Regret is a curious beast. Usually, it arrives slowly, years after a mistake. But for Elena, regret arrived like a freight train, crushing every bone in her body in a matter of seconds. Imagine the scene. It is raining. Not a common rain, but that black, oily rain, mixed with the ash of a city that has been burning for 2 days. Elena is on her knees in the mud. The Italian designer suit, which cost a common worker's annual salary, is now nothing but bloody rags stuck to her skin. She coughs, and the sound is horrible, wet, as if her lungs were giving up. But the physical pain is nothing compared to what she is seeing. Inches from her face, there is an invisible wall. Bulletproof glass, tempered, reinforced with polycarbonate, 10 centimeters thick. Elena rests her dirty hands on the cold surface of the glass. On the other side, it is like looking at heaven while being in hell. Inside, the light is golden and warm, coming from a crackling fireplace. The floor is covered in Persian rugs. There are bookshelves that go from floor to ceiling. The silence inside must be absolute, a hermetic peace. And in the center of this oasis, sitting in an aged leather armchair, is he, the man. He holds a baccarat crystal goblet. The wine inside is dark, full-bodied, probably a vintage from before the chaos. He swirls the liquid slowly, watching the tears of the wine run down the crystal. He looks clean, smells of expensive soap and sandalwood. He raises his eyes and sees Elena crushed against the glass. Elena screams. She screams until her throat tears. Open, for the love of God, I know who you are. Open. But the glass was designed to isolate the outside world. The man hears nothing but the crackling of the firewood in the fireplace. He sees her desperation, eyes bulging from their sockets, pure terror. But he doesn't move. He doesn't smile with sadism, nor cry with pity. His expression is one of geological indifference, like a mountain looking at an ant. Behind Elena, in the darkness of the storm, a guttural sound is heard. Dragging footsteps in the mud, dozens of them. The smell of rotting flesh floods the air. The creatures have found her. Elena turns for a second and sees glowing eyes in the darkness. She looks back at the man in the bunker. He brings the glass to his mouth and takes a smooth sip. He chose to leave her out. And as the claws reach Elena's shoulder, the last thing she thinks about isn't the pain of death, but the brutal irony that 48 hours ago, she had the chance to save that man and chose to speed up the car. Let's rewind the tape. Let's go back to when the world still made sense, or at least the twisted sense that Elena knew. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those where the sun seems to want to melt the asphalt. Elena was inside her private sanctuary, a Range Rover Sentinel SUV, level 4 armored. The interior smelled of new leather and ambition. The air conditioning was locked at 18 degrees, creating a cold bubble that separated her from the sweaty and chaotic reality outside. Elena was on the phone, connected via Bluetooth to the car's surround sound system. She wasn't talking, she was executing. On the other end of the line, a project manager was trying to explain a 2-day delay in the delivery of a report. Elena's voice was calm, but it was the calm of a scalpel cutting skin. "Roberto," she said, while checking her lipstick in the rearview mirror, "I don't care if your daughter is in the hospital. If the report isn't on my desk by noon, you don't even need to come back to get your personal things. I'll have them delivered in a cardboard box at the front desk." She hung up without waiting for an answer. She felt a small wave of dopamine. Power, control, that was what drove her. She looked at her watch, 8:45. She had a meeting with Chinese investors at 9:30. Life was a chessboard and she was the queen, moving freely while the pawns killed each other for crumbs. It was then that she noticed the first anomaly. A police car flew by on the shoulder, sirens off, but lights spinning frantically. Then another, and an ambulance. Elena frowned. Great, she thought. Some idiot accident is going to delay my day. She turned on the radio, hoping to hear the traffic report. But there was no pop music, nor annoying mattress commercials. There were overlapping voices, screams in the background. The announcer stuttered, trying to maintain professional composure while reporting bizarre incidents in the city center. Reports of mass assaults in the subway. Authorities asked that everyone remain in there. My God, what is that? The radio signal cut to static hiss. Elena huffed, impatient. She changed the station. Static. Changed again. A recorded emergency voice repeated, "Stay at home. Lock the doors. Do not approach the infected." Infected. Elena laughed, a dry and cynical sound. What viral joke is this now? She muttered to herself. To her, nothing bad could happen. She had money. She had armor. The bad world was something that happened to other people, not to her. But then, traffic stopped. It wasn't a gradual slowdown. It was a total, mechanical stop. Miles of steel and rubber frozen on the highway. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural. Elena drummed her perfectly manicured fingernails on the leather steering wheel. She didn't know, but that was the last minute of normality of her life. The bubble was about to burst. 5 minutes passed. Elena was already typing a furious email to the city hall complaining about traffic management when she saw movement in the rearview mirror. Amidst the stopped cars, people began to get out, not to stretch their legs, but to run. They abandoned their vehicles, popular sedans, work trucks, and ran along the shoulder, looking back with wide eyes. Elena locked the SUV doors with a touch of the central button. The metallic sound of the locks descending was comforting. Animals, she thought, always panicking over anything. That was when a shadow fell over the passenger window. Thud, thud, thud. Someone was banging on the tinted glass. Strong, desperate knocks. Elena turned her face slowly, with the expression of someone who just found a cockroach in their salad. Outside, hunched over, was a man. He was the antithesis of everything Elena valued. He wore an old military coat, too big for him, stained with grease and dirt. His beard was gray and disheveled. On his back, a camping backpack that seemed to weigh a ton, full of rolls of blueprints, antennas, and strange equipment. He didn't have a gun. He didn't have a rock. He only had his hands pressed against the glass. He was shouting something that the armor muffled almost completely. Elena felt disgust rise in her throat. A beggar, an opportunistic panhandler, taking advantage of the traffic jam to extort drivers. The man realized she wouldn't open. He went around the car and stopped in front of the hood, gesturing forward, pointing to the horizon where black smoke was starting to rise. He ran to the driver's window. He pressed his face against the glass. Elena could see every dirty pore, every drop of sweat rolling down his forehead. Elena pressed the external intercom button, a security feature so she didn't have to open the window. Her voice came out through the external speakers, metallic and authoritative. "Step away from the vehicle now, or I will run you over." The man didn't back down. On the contrary, he screamed at the glass, trying to make himself heard. "Lady, listen. Money is gone. That back there is the end of the line. I am Arthur Valente. I built a shelter. I have the coordinates, but my car broke down 2 kilometers from here. Give me a ride. If you take me to the mountains, I guarantee your entry. I have room for one more." Elena looked at him. Arthur Valente. The name sounded vaguely familiar, perhaps from some tabloid headline about doomsday preppers or eccentric billionaires. But in her eyes, there stood only a dirty madman, a delusional old man with a backpack of trash. "Last warning," said Elena, her hand hovering over the gear shift. "You don't understand," Arthur shouted, tears of frustration mixing with the sweat. "They are coming. Look back. Your armor won't withstand the horde. Let me in. I'll save your life." Elena looked in the rearview mirror. She saw only chaos, people running. She didn't need a crazy old man in her cream leather car. She needed to get out of there. She saw an opening, the grassy central median. If she went up with a 4x4, she could cut across and escape against traffic. She made the decision in a millisecond, a decision that would seal her fate. She slammed on the accelerator. The V8 engine roared like a monster waking up. The SUV lunged forward. Arthur had to throw himself to the side, falling onto the hot asphalt to avoid being crushed by the gigantic wheels. Elena didn't even look back. While the car climbed onto the median, crushing flowers and throwing dirt into the air, she felt only relief at getting rid of the parasite. In the rearview mirror, the image of Arthur becoming small, sitting on the ground, hugging his backpack, disappeared into the smoke. She smiled. She was smarter. She was faster. Little did she know that she had just left behind the only man in the world who held the key to the future. Elena drove for about 3 kilometers against traffic. For a brief moment, the euphoria of the escape masked reality. The powerful engine devoured the asphalt, and the air suspension system turned the potholes and debris into mere gentle ripples. She felt invincible again. She called the office. No signal. Called her husband. Voicemail. Network overloaded, said the digital dashboard screen. But Elena's luck had a limit, and it was at the North Viaduct exit. Rounding the curve, she braked sharply. The ABS shuddered under her foot. Ahead, there was no road. There was a wall, overturned trucks, buses sideways, and flames rising 10 meters high. It was a military blockade that had failed miserably. Elena shifted into reverse, her heart starting to beat out of rhythm for the first time. She looked in the rearview mirror and saw the reason the blockade failed. A gray and furious mass was running down the lane behind her. Not dozens, hundreds. She tried to maneuver, spinning the steering wheel frantically, but the SUV's rear wheels slid in a puddle of spilled oil from an overturned tanker. The car spun, heavy, and the rear hit hard against the concrete barrier. The engine died. Silence returned to the cabin, but now it was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. Elena tried to start the car. The starter motor groaned, but it wouldn't catch. She looked outside. The mass of people, or whatever they were, was arriving. And that was when Elena's fortress transformed. The security locks, the bulletproof glass, the reinforced steel, that was no longer a shield. It was a cage, a $200,000 golden cage. The first impact came seconds later. A body slammed against the driver's door. Elena screamed. The face that crushed against the glass had no humanity left. The skin was pale, black veins pulsed under the dermis, and the mouth was smeared with fresh blood. The creature felt no pain. It banged its head against the bulletproof glass repeatedly, leaving red and oily stains. Soon, there was another, and another. The car began to rock. The suspension system creaked under the weight of the crowd, climbing onto the hood, onto the roof. The sunlight was blocked by the bodies. Elena was buried alive inside her own car. She saw nails scratching the glass, teeth trying to bite the metal. The armor would withstand pistol shots, yes, but would it withstand the weight of 50 bodies trying to get in? The glass began to make a sound Elena had never heard before, a sharp crack, like ice breaking. The decision to get out of the car wasn't rational. It was pure animal instinct, the instinct that says it is better to die running than to die trapped. Elena saw an opening. The weight of the crowd on the roof made the car tilt dangerously to the right, toward a grassy embankment that led down to an industrial area. The zombies on the left side slipped off. She grabbed her designer leather bag, a ridiculous conditioned reflex, and pulled the handle. The heavy door opened, pushing two infected away. The noise of the world outside hit her like a physical punch. It wasn't muffled like inside the car. It was deafening. Screams, distant sirens, the wet sound of flesh being torn, and that collective growl that seemed to come from the center of the earth. Elena jumped. The heel of her Louboutin shoe broke as soon as it touched the asphalt. She fell to her knees, tearing her pantyhose and scraping her skin. The pain was sharp, but adrenaline made her get up instantly. An infected, wearing a gas station attendant uniform, lunged at her. Elena acted without thinking. She swung the heavy bag and hit the metal buckle against the creature's face. The man stumbled. Elena didn't wait to see if he fell. She ran. She went down the embankment, slipping on the dry grass and trash. Behind her, the SUV was swallowed by the horde. She ran toward the industrial warehouses, seeking shadows, seeking silence. It was on this path, between the viaduct and the warehouses, that Elena saw the real first blood. Not on TV, not in movies. Live, she saw a mother trying to put her son inside a car, only to be pulled by her feet from under the vehicle. Elena stopped for a second, paralyzed by horror. The woman looked at Elena, reached out her hand, begged for help with her eyes. Elena had a fire extinguisher she had found on the ground near a truck. She could try to help, but the cold executive spoke louder than the human. The calculation was fast. If I go there, I die. Elena turned her face away. She covered her ears not to hear the woman's screams cease and kept running. She was alive, yes, but in that moment, going down that filthy embankment, she left the first piece of her soul behind. Half an hour later, Elena was hiding behind a dumpster in a narrow alley. She was out of breath, dirty with grease, and shaking uncontrollably. Thirst was beginning to punish her dry throat. She heard footsteps, human footsteps, cautious rhythm, not the frantic dragging of the infected. A man appeared at the alley entrance. He carried a crowbar stained with dark blood and a half-full bottle of mineral water. He looked like a construction worker, robust, with the look of someone who had already understood the new rules of the game. Elena stood up, trying to recover her posture of authority. She adjusted her torn blazer and wiped her face. "You," she called, using her boardroom tone of voice. "I need that water, and I need you to escort me to the noble area of the city. My husband is influential. He will reward you." The man stopped and looked at her. He didn't seem impressed. He looked tired. He unscrewed the bottle cap and took a long sip, looking into her eyes while the water ran down his chin. Elena was indignant. She opened her bag. Her wallet was there. She pulled out a wad of bills. It was dollars and local currency, about 5,000 in cash, which she always carried for emergencies. "Listen," she said, extending the wad of money. The bills trembled in her hand. "There is 5,000 here. It's all yours, for the bottle and for protection. Take it. It's 6 months' salary for someone like you." The worker looked at the money. Then he looked at the water. A sad and cynical smile appeared on his face. He approached slowly. Elena puffed out her chest, thinking the transaction was done. Money always won. Always. The man took the wad of bills from her hand. He felt the texture of the paper. "You know," he said, with a raspy voice. "Toilet paper ran out at the corner market an hour ago. This here will be very useful." He put the money in his back pocket, as if it were a dirty handkerchief. "But the water," he shook the bottle. "Water is worth more than your life now, ma'am." He turned his back and started walking. "Wait!" Elena screamed, her voice failing, desperation breaking the mask of arrogance. "I have cards. I have jewelry. This watch costs 30,000. The man didn't even stop. "Eat the watch when you feel hungry," he shouted back, disappearing around the corner. Elena was left alone in the alley, holding her wrist where the gold Rolex weighed uselessly. For the first time in her life, she was poor, destitute. She looked at the shiny watch and felt an uncontrollable urge to cry. The world had turned upside down, and the currency of exchange was no longer gold. It was survival, and she was bankrupt. Night fell over the city like a dirty shroud. Without electricity in most neighborhoods, the only lighting came from burning buildings on the horizon and the full moon, indifferent to the massacre down below. Elena limped. Her feet, used to handmade Italian shoes, were raw. She had lost a shoe kilometers ago and now walked with one bare foot and the other protected by rags tied with wire. She found shelter in a corner newsstand, whose metal structure had been partially crushed by a fallen pole. Inside, it smelled of old paper and urine. She curled up on the floor, shivering with cold, trying to ignore the distant screams echoing in the night. That was when the light of a police search helicopter, probably the last one still in the air, swept across the street. The beam of light illuminated the inside of the newsstand for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, Elena saw the face of her nightmare. There was a business magazine lying on the ground, covered in dust. The cover, printed on glossy paper, showed a man in an impeccable suit, arms crossed, looking at the future with seriousness. The headline screamed, "The Noah of the 21st Century, Arthur Valente and his self-sustainable bunker project that the media calls madness." Elena picked up the magazine with trembling hands. She brought her face close to the photo in the gloom. The eyes, they were the same desperate eyes that stared at her through the car glass hours before. The beard was shaved in the photo, the suit was expensive, but it was him, the beggar, the madman, the man she almost ran over. Next to the magazine, fallen near the body of the dead newsstand vendor, was a portable shortwave radio, still on, hissing quietly. Elena picked it up. Amidst the static, a repetitive voice, recorded on a loop, pierced the silence. "Access coordinates Alpha 9. Repeating, North Sector, 3 Towers Hill. Gates close in 24 hours. Whoever is listening, bring seeds, bring skills, do not bring money. This is Arthur Valente." End of transmission. Elena felt her stomach drop. It wasn't hunger. It was the nausea of epiphany. The man she called a parasite was the owner of the Ark, and she had left him to die. But the voice on the radio said the gates were still open. Hope reignited in her chest, but it was a toxic hope mixed with guilt and greed. "He doesn't know who I am," she thought. "If I get there, I can lie. I can get in." The 3 Towers Hill was 20 kilometers away, in the rural zone, where summer mansions gave way to dense forest. 20 kilometers is nothing in an air-conditioned Range Rover. On foot, in the middle of the apocalypse, it is an odyssey. Elena began to walk. She was no longer the executive. She was a migratory animal moved by a single instinct to reach the bunker. The city was being left behind, transforming into a labyrinth of shadows. At every corner, a test. She had to hide inside a dumpster full of rotting restaurant scraps to avoid a group of looters who laughed while breaking shop windows. The smell of rotten fish permeated her hair, that hair that used to be treated in thousand-reel salons. She didn't care. Disgust had disappeared. Only the will to live remained. Halfway there, thirst became unbearable. Elena found a puddle of water accumulated on the tarp of an abandoned truck. The water was green, with dead leaves floating. The old Elena would have preferred to die of thirst. The new Elena pushed the leaves away with her dirty hand and drank greedily, feeling the taste of dirt and slime go down her throat as if it were nectar. She looked at the Rolex watch on her wrist all the time, but it had stopped after a bump. Time was now measured by the sun rising on the horizon. Only a few hours remained until Arthur's deadline. line. Her legs trembled, cramps tore at her calves, but the voice on the radio kept whispering in her mind, bunker, food, safety. 5 kilometers from the destination, the asphalt road ended and the dirt road climbing the mountain began. Elena was exhausted. She could barely lift her feet. That was when she saw the bicycle, a high-performance mountain bike, lying on the side of the road. Next to it, a teenage girl was sitting, crying softly. The girl had a nasty wound on her leg, a deep cut that was bleeding a lot. She was trying to tie an improvised bandage, but her hands were shaking too much. Upon seeing Elena approach, the girl's eyes shined with relief. "Miss," the girl called, "help me, please. I twisted my ankle and cut my leg falling. I know where Valente's shelter is. It's just up there. If you help me get on the bike, we can go pushing it together. He will let us in if we are together." Elena stopped. She looked at the girl, looked at the wound, looked at the steep climb of the mountain. Elena's mental calculation was cold and fast, the same type of calculation she used to fire employees. "This girl is dead weight. She will slow me down. If we go slowly, the gate closes. If I go alone, I make it." Elena crouched beside the girl. "It's okay, honey," said Elena, with a soft voice she hadn't used in years. "Let me see that." When the girl relaxed, expecting care, Elena pushed her hard to the side, throwing her into the roadside ditch. The girl screamed in pain and surprise. Elena didn't look. She picked up the bike. "Sorry," murmured Elena, climbing onto the saddle, "but there is no room for two in my survival." She started pedaling up the mountain. Behind her, the girls screaming, "Please, don't leave me here. They are coming," grew fainter until they disappeared, swallowed by the mountain wind. Elena pedaled hard, feeling her thighs burn. She had just condemned an innocent to death to gain a 15-minute advantage. She thought she was paying the price of passage, but the universe was recording the debt, and the collection would be made at the gate. Elena's lungs burned as if she had inhaled ground glass. The stolen bicycle was left behind in the last 100 meters, where the slope of the mountain became impossible to pedal. She crawled the rest of the way, using her broken nails to pull herself through the damp earth and loose rocks. When she finally reached the top, the sight made her forget the pain. It wasn't just a bunker. It was a masterpiece of brutalist engineering embedded in the rock. A colossal entrance of concrete and titanium steel, windowless, just a massive door that looked like the entrance to a giant bank vault. Cameras with motion sensors turned silently toward her, focusing their lenses like the eyes of cybernetic predators. Elena looked at the sky. Storm clouds were closing in, bringing the acid rain she felt at the beginning of the story. She looked at the panel next to the door. A digital screen glowed with a red countdown. 4 minutes and 59 seconds to total lockdown. 5 minutes. She had made it. She had won. Elena tried to clean herself up. She wiped her mud-stained hands on her tangled hair, trying to regain some dignity. She adjusted her torn blazer. She needed to look useful, needed to look like the successful executive, not the wild animal she had become on the road. She took a deep breath, composed her posture, and pressed the intercom button. The sound of the doorbell echoed, deep and authoritative. "Identify yourself," said a digitized voice. Elena Vasconcelos," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am CEO of Vasconcelos Logistics. I have experience in resource management. I can be useful." There was silence, a long and torturous silence. Then, a mechanical hum made the ground shake, but the door didn't open. Instead, a metal plate slid open on the wall next to the door, revealing that thick 10-centimeter glass, lit from within. Elena ran to the glass and looked inside. It was the bunker's entrance hall, and there, walking calmly toward her, coming from the underground luxury, was Arthur. Arthur didn't seem surprised. He stopped on the other side of the glass. He was clean, shaved, wearing that silk robe that screamed comfort. The difference between the two worlds was violent. Elena in the rain, in the cold, in the mud. Arthur in the warmth, in the light, in safety. He touched a panel on the inner wall, and the sound of his voice came out crisp through an external speaker above Elena's head. "Vasconcelos Logistics," Arthur said, thoughtfully. "Big company, impressive fleet, very safe cars." Elena's heart stopped. He knew. "Arthur," she shouted, pressing her hands against the glass. "Arthur, please. I didn't know who you were. I was afraid. You have to understand. The world was ending. I panicked." Arthur shook his head slowly. "No, Elena. Panic makes people run. Character makes people choose. I saw you in that traffic jam. I saw your eyes. There was no fear in them when you sped up the car. There was contempt." Elena began to cry, hot tears carving paths through the dirt on her face. "Forgive me. I can change. I have money. I have accounts in Switzerland. I'll transfer everything to you when the systems come back." Arthur laughed. A sad laugh, without humor. Money, he pointed to a fireplace at the back of the hall. Elena saw, horrified, that the fire was being fueled by stacks of $100 bills. Inside here, the only currency is trust, Elena, and you are in debt. Elena looked back. The forest was moving. The shadows were arriving. The smell of rot grew stronger. They are coming, she screamed, banging on the glass. Please, Arthur, I did what I needed to survive. I left everything behind to get here. Arthur moved closer to the glass. He looked deep into her eyes. I know. My long-range thermal cameras picked you up on the road 2 kilometers ago. I saw the girl, Elena. I saw the girl with the bicycle. Elena's blood ran cold. You left her to die to buy time, Arthur continued, his voice cold as the steel of the door. This bunker was built to preserve humanity. If I let you in, I would be letting the virus in. Not the virus out there, the virus of selfishness. And that is what really destroyed the world. The lights on the external panel flashed. The countdown reached 0. System lockdown initiated, said the computerized voice. A steel shutter began to descend slowly over the glass, like an eyelid closing the eyes of God. No, no, Elena screamed, pounding on the barrier. Arthur turned his back. He picked up his glass of wine from a side table. Goodbye, Elena. Enjoy your freedom. You don't depend on anyone now, exactly as you wanted. The steel shutter closed with a final clang, cutting off the light, the warmth, and the hope. Elena was left in total darkness. The rain increased, washing away her tears, but not her sins. And then, in the woods behind her, a twig snapped. Then, another. A hungry moan echoed 3 meters from her back. Elena turned around, pressing her back against the cold door that would never open. She was the queen of the asphalt. And now, finally, she would be part of the road forever.